At 0827 hours on April 16, 1945, gunner's mate second class Robert Henshaw crouched behind his forward 40mm gun mount on USS Laffey, 50 miles north of Okinawa, watching 8 blips descend on the radar repeater screen bolted to his gun station. His hands rested on the firing mechanism. The deck vibrated beneath his boots. Salt spray from the morning chop misted across his face. The gun mount smelled like oil and cordite from the previous day's firing drills. The radio crackled. Combat Information Center. All gun stations, 8 contacts bearing 340, range 12 miles, altitude 8,000. Probable friendlies. Marine Corsairs returning from Dawn Cap. Fire Control Officer Lieutenant James Walsh's voice followed immediately. All guns hold fire. I repeat, hold fire. Await visual confirmation. Henshaw raised his binoculars. 8 aircraft, descending gradually from 8,000 feet. Too far for visual identification. Could be Corsairs, could be Zeros. His training said, wait. His orders said wait. Doctrine said wait for confirmation. But Henshaw had been watching kamikazes for 6 weeks, had watched 14 destroyers take hits, had watched USS Bush sink with 94 men aboard, and he'd learned something radar couldn't tell you and doctrine didn't account for. Kamikazes flew different. The 8 aircraft reached 4,000 feet. Still descending, still looked like a normal approach pattern. Henshaw's loader, Seaman First Class Danny Morrison, stood beside him watching the sky. Corsairs, right? Gotta be Corsairs. Henshaw didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the lead aircraft. At 2,500 feet, it happened. The wing waggle. Just a slight roll left, then right. Target acquisition. Henshaw's pulse hammered in his ears. Then all 8 aircraft dropped 200 feet simultaneously, building terminal velocity. Then their noses pitched down, 8 degrees steeper than any normal approach. The 3-part pattern. Commitment. Henshaw's hands moved to the firing mechanism. Morrison saw it. Bobby, they haven't given the order. They're committed, Henshaw said. He opened fire, 12 seconds before anyone else. 12 seconds before the first Zero pulled out of its feint and dove straight at Laffey's bridge. 12 seconds that would change everything. The Okinawa campaign began April 1st, 1945. Operation Iceberg. Final stepping stone before invading mainland Japan. The Japanese knew it. They committed everything they had left. Aircraft, pilots, ships, but mostly aircraft. Kamikaze. Between April 1st and June 22nd, the Japanese flew 1,900 kamikaze sorties against the US fleet off Okinawa. Not bombing runs, not strafing attacks. Suicide missions, pilots who loaded their aircraft with explosives and flew them directly into American ships. The US Navy positioned radar picket destroyers in a ring 50 miles around Okinawa. Early warning stations. 17 destroyers on picket duty at any given time. Their job was simple and brutal. Detect incoming Japanese aircraft. Alert the fleet. Shoot down as many as possible. Survive if you could. The statistics were catastrophic. By mid-April, 16 radar picket destroyers had been sunk, 87 more damaged. The destroyers were dying faster than the Navy could replace them. Standard engagement doctrine was failing. The math was simple. Average kamikaze approach took 45 seconds from visual identification to impact. Standard doctrine required visual confirmation before opening fire. That confirmation took 6 to 8 seconds. Then the fire control officer issued the order. Another 4 seconds. Then gun crews acquired targets and opened fire. Total time from visual identification to first shots, 18 to 22 seconds. That left 15 to 20 seconds of effective fire, barely enough to engage a single aircraft. Nowhere near enough when kamikazes attacked in coordinated waves of 4 to 8 aircraft hitting simultaneously. Gun crews couldn't track multiple targets with a 15-second response window. They'd engage the lead. Aircraft, maybe get 1 or 2, but the rest got through. The math killed sailors. USS Bush, March 31st. 6 kamikazes. 3 got through, 94 men dead. USS Colquhoun, April 6th. 4 kamikazes. 2 got through, 35 men dead. USS Manat El Abele, April 12th. 8 kamikazes. 5 got through, ship broke in half. 79 men dead. The pattern repeated every day. Coordinated kamikaze attacks against isolated destroyers. Standard doctrine couldn't stop them. The fundamental problem was doctrinal. Navy gunnery procedures assumed sequential attacks, one aircraft at a time. Doctrine from pre-war carrier battles where Japanese pilots valued their lives, pulled out of dives, attacked again. But kamikazes didn't pull out. They didn't attack sequentially. They coordinated. They overwhelmed defensive fire through simultaneous impact. And doctrine took 18 to 22 seconds to authorize shooting them. Those seconds were killing American sailors. By April 16th, 432 men had died on radar picket duty in 15 days. The average life expectancy for a destroyer on Picket Station was 8 days. Gun crews knew the statistics. Every morning they took station 50 miles north of Okinawa. They knew they might not come back. Something had to change. Doctrine wasn't working. Orders weren't working. Waiting for confirmation wasn't working. One gunner figured out what would work. But it required breaking every rule in the book. Robert Michael Henshaw grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana, born 1923. High school dropout, worked a factory job at the Columbian Enamelling and Stamping Company. Made artillery shell casings. December 1942, 6 days after his 19th birthday, he walked into the Navy recruiting office downtown and enlisted. He wasn't running toward glory, wasn't motivated by patriotism speeches or recruitment posters. He enlisted because the draft was coming anyway and the Navy paid better than the Army. Basic training at Great Lakes Naval Station, gunnery school at Naval Station San Diego. He graduated top 15% of his class. Not because he was the fastest or the strongest, because he watched everything. His instructors noted it in his training file. Henshaw observes before acting. Slow to engage but precise when he does. Analytical temperament. Suitable for fire control or gunnery positions requiring patience. December 1944. Henshaw was assigned to USS Laffey, a Fletcher-class destroyer fresh from overhaul. DD 724. The ship had a reputation. Commissioned 1944, immediately sent to Normandy for D-Day support, then transferred to the Pacific. Fast, well-armed, crew of 336 men who knew their jobs. Henshaw was assigned to Gun Mount 43, the forward 40mm Bofors quad mount. 4 barrels, 160-degree firing arc covering the forward approaches to the ship. The gun could fire 160 rounds per minute per barrel, 640 rounds per minute total. Maximum effective range 5,000 yards. The 40mm was the Navy's primary anti-aircraft weapon. More kamikazes were shot down by 40mm guns than any other system. Henshaw's gun crew was 4 men. The pointer controlled elevation, the trainer controlled traverse, the loader fed ammunition belts. Henshaw was gun captain. He commanded the mount, selected targets, controlled rate of fire. His crew depended on his decisions. He was 22 years old, quiet, didn't drink much, didn't gamble, didn't chase women during port calls. Most of the crew thought he was boring. His gun crew knew different. They knew Henshaw watched everything, studied everything, had a small red notebook he carried everywhere. The notebook was standard Navy issue, 4 by 6 inches, water-resistant cover, 50 pages. Most sailors used them for maintenance logs or supply inventories. Henshaw used his to track aircraft behavior. He started the notebook in March 1945 when Laffey began radar picket duty off Okinawa. Every time Japanese aircraft appeared, Henshaw watched them, noted their altitude, approach angle, speed, behavior patterns. When other ships were attacked, he watched through binoculars. It recorded what happened, what worked, what didn't. His gun crew thought it was weird. Morrison, his loader, asked him once why he bothered. "We just shoot what they tell us to shoot, Bobby. What's the point of writing it down?" Henshaw's response, "Because people keep dying and nobody's asking why." That was Henshaw. Not aggressive, not loud, not the kind of sailor who stood out, but he studied failures. Most sailors forgot about attacks after they were over, focused on survival, on the next mission. Henshaw watched the patterns, watched what separated ships that survived from ships that sank. By April 16th, Henshaw had been on radar picket duty for 6 weeks. He'd watched 14 destroyers take hits, watched 3 sink: USS Dickerson, USS Emmons, USS Bush. Each one followed the same pattern. Kamikazes attacked in coordinated waves. Gun crews opened fire at standard timing. Some kamikazes got shot down. Some got through. Ships that took 2 or more kamikaze hits usually sank. Henshaw knew his ship was living on borrowed time. Laffey had been lucky so far, attacked 7 times, no hits. But luck runs out. He needed something better than luck. That's why he started tracking the patterns. That's why he filled his notebook with observations no one else bothered recording. That's why, on April 16th, he would break orders and fire 12 seconds early. Because waiting for orders was killing sailors. And Henshaw had figured out how to stop waiting. March 31st, 1945, 1530 hours. USS Bush was 4 miles northwest of Laffey's position when 6 kamikazes attacked. Henshaw watched from his gun mount. His binoculars were Navy issue, 7x50 magnification, good enough to see individual aircraft at 4 miles if the light was right. The kamikazes appeared from the north, 6 Mitsubishi, A6 M0s. They descended from 12,000 feet in what looked like a standard patrol pattern. Bush's radar picked them up. Combat Information Center identified them as probable hostiles but wasn't certain. Fire Control ordered gun crews to stand ready but hold fire pending confirmation. At 8,000 feet, the Zeros tightened formation. At 4,000 feet, something happened that Henshaw almost missed. The lead aircraft's wings waggled, left roll, right roll, level again. It looked like routine control input, trimming for level flight. Except all 6 aircraft did it simultaneously. Perfect coordination. Henshaw lowered his binoculars, raised them again, watched closer. 30 seconds after the wing waggle, all 6 Zeros dropped altitude, not a gradual descent, a sharp 200-foot drop. Noses dipped, engines screamed, they fell together and leveled at 3,800 feet. Then they dove, not the shallow attack angle of a normal dive bomber, steep. Henshaw estimated 40 to 45 degrees nose down. Committed. Bush's guns opened fire when the Zeros reached 2,500 feet. Standard doctrine timing. They shot down 3 kamikazes. But 3 got through. All 3 hit Bush in a 15-second span. The destroyer broke apart, capsized in 4 minutes. 94 men died. 33 survived. Henshaw watched it happen, watched the 3 kamikazes hit, watched the ship die. And he wrote in his notebook, "Wing waggle 30 seconds before commitment." Why? Target lock? April 6th, 1945. USS Colquhoun, 2 miles east of Laffey. Henshaw was manning his gun mount during morning patrol when 4 Zeros appeared. This time he watched specifically for the wing waggle. The Zeros descended from 10,000 feet. Loose formation, looked unthreatening. At 5,000 feet, Henshaw saw it again. Wing waggle. All 4 aircraft, simultaneous. Then exactly 30 seconds later, they dropped altitude. Henshaw tracked them with his binoculars. The drop was precise, 200 feet. He could tell because Colquhoun's mast was 185 feet tall, and the Zeros dropped slightly more than mast height. Then, the dive. Steep angle, committed, no hesitation. Colquhoun's guns opened fire at standard timing. Shot down 2 kamikazes. 2 got through. Colquhoun survived but took heavy damage. 35 men killed, 21 wounded. Henshaw wrote in his notebook, "Altitude drop equals velocity build. Always 200 feet, precise. April 12, 1945. USS Manat El Abele, 8 miles south of Laffey's position. Henshaw wasn't close enough to see the wing waggle this time, but he was close enough to see the dive angle. 8 kamikazes attacked Abele. Henshaw watched through his binoculars. The Zeros dove from 4,000 feet. He tried to estimate their nose angle, compared it to normal dive bombing attacks he'd seen earlier in the war. Normal dive bombers went down at 30 to 35 degrees, steep enough to build speed, shallow enough to pull out. These kamikazes dove steeper. Henshaw estimated 40 to 45 degrees, maybe steeper. The angle was wrong for any attack where the pilot planned to pull out. It was a terminal angle, committed, no recovery possible even if the pilot changed his mind. Abele's guns shot down 3 kamikazes. 5 got through. The destroyer broke in half, sank in 2 minutes. 79 men killed. Henshaw wrote in his notebook, "Steep angle equals committed. No pullout planned. 8-12 degrees steeper than normal dive bomber. 3 incidents. 3 observations. A pattern emerging. Wing waggle. The kamikazes did it 25 to 30 seconds before committing to the dive. Henshaw theorized it was target acquisition lock. The pilot confirming his target, making final trim adjustments, preparing for the terminal dive. Altitude drop. Exactly 200 feet, exactly 20 to 25 seconds before the final dive. Building terminal velocity. Trading altitude for speed. Once a kamikaze pilot made that drop, he was committed to attacking that specific ship. No pulling out, no changing targets, steep nose angle, 8 to 12 degrees steeper than a normal dive bomber. Once the nose went down to that angle, the pilot couldn't pull out even if he wanted to. Physics took over. Terminal dive, impact or death. 3 behaviors, 3 indicators of kamikaze commitment, and they happened 25 to 30 seconds before. Standard doctrine authorized opening fire. Henshaw stared at his notebook on the night of April 15th. He'd watched 3 destroyers die, watched 208 men killed, and he'd seen the same pattern every time. The kamikazes committed 25 to 30 seconds before American gun crews were authorized to shoot them. That 5 to 30 second gap was killing sailors. But Henshaw had a problem. He was 1 gunner on 1 destroyer. His observations were in a personal notebook. No official documentation. No command approval. No one else was tracking these patterns. Just him. If he was right, firing early could save ships, could save lives. But if he was wrong, he'd be court-martialed for firing on friendly aircraft, for disobeying direct orders, for wasting ammunition. The stakes were absolute. Trust his pattern, or follow doctrine. Act alone or wait for confirmation. Save lives or follow rules. April 16th, 1945, 0827 hours. Henshaw would make his choice, and 450 men would come home because of it. April 15th, 1945, 2200 hours. USS Laffey was berthed at Karama Reto, a small island group 15 miles west of Okinawa. The anchorage served as a forward repair and resupply base. Destroyers rotated off radar picket duty every 4 days for maintenance, ammunition reload, crew rest. Henshaw sat on his bunk in the forward enlisted berthing compartment. The space was cramped. 60 bunks stacked 3 high in a compartment designed for 40. The air smelled like sweat, diesel fuel, and cigarette smoke. An overhead ventilation fan rattled but didn't move enough air to matter. The heat was oppressive. He had his notebook open, reading his entries from March 31st, April 6th, April 12th. The 3-part pattern: wing waggle, altitude drop, steep nose angle. The numbers were consistent. The timing was consistent. 25 to 30 seconds before American guns opened fire, kamikazes showed commitment. Morrison climbed into the bunk beside Henshaw's. His loader was 19 years old, from Portland, Oregon. Joined the Navy straight out of high school. Good kid, fast hands on the ammunition feed, reliable under fire. You writing in that notebook again? Morrison asked. Henshaw nodded. What's so important you gotta write it down every night? Henshaw looked at Morrison, considered not answering. But they'd been crewing the same gun mount for 4 months. They'd been shot at together. That created a bond. Morrison deserved to know. I'm tracking kamikaze behavior patterns, Henshaw said. Morrison propped himself up on one elbow. What kind of patterns? Henshaw showed him the notebook, explained the wing waggle, explained the 200-foot altitude drop, explained the steep nose angle, explained how all 3 behaviors happened before standard doctrine authorized fire. Morrison listened without interrupting. When Henshaw finished, Morrison asked the obvious question. So you're saying we should fire before the order? I'm saying we should fire when they commit, not when we confirm. That's against doctrine. You'll get court-martialed. Or I'll save the ship. Morrison stared at him. You're serious? Dead serious. Bobby, you fire early, and you're wrong. They'll hang you, literally. Firing on friendly aircraft in a combat zone is a capital offense. Henshaw closed the notebook. How many ships have we watched sink, Danny? How many men have we watched die because we waited for confirmation? Morrison didn't answer. Bush lost 94 men, Henshaw continued. Colquhoun lost 35. Abele lost 79. That's 208 men in 2 weeks, all because we waited for confirmation before firing. By the time we confirm hostile intent, they're already inside our effective fire envelope. We're reacting to them. They're dictating the engagement. So what are you going to do? Tomorrow morning, if we get attacked, I'm firing the moment I see the 3-part pattern. I'm not waiting for confirmation. I'm not waiting for the order. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, If you fire early, and you're wrong, I'll testify you gave the order and I was just following it. I'm not letting you hang alone. Henshaw looked at his loader. That's not necessary. Yeah, it is. We're a gun crew. We sink or swim together. Across the berthing compartment, Petty Officer 3rd Class James Delevsky overheard the conversation. Delevsky was the gun captain for Mount 44, the aft 40mm position. He was 26 years old, from Chicago, Navy, since 1940, more experienced than Henshaw. Delevsky walked over. Did I just hear you say you're planning to fire without orders? Henshaw nodded. That's suicide. Professional suicide. Maybe, but I'm right. You've got 3 data points, Henshaw, 3 observations. That's not enough to change doctrine. That's not enough to risk a court-martial. Henshaw handed him the notebook. Read it. Tell me I'm wrong. Delevsky read the entries. March 31st, April 6th, April 12th. The wing waggle, the altitude drop, the nose angle, the timing. He read it twice. Then he looked at Henshaw. The pattern's consistent, Delevsky admitted. It's not just consistent, it's predictive. If you see all 3 behaviors, the aircraft is committed to a kamikaze run. No exceptions. Not in 3 observations. 3 observations isn't a large sample size. How many more ships have to sink before the sample size is large enough? Delevsky stared at the notebook. He'd been on radar picket duty for 7 weeks, longer than Henshaw. He'd watched more ships die, USS Dickerson, USS Emmons, USS Bush, USS Colquhoun, USS Abele, 5 destroyers sunk. Over 300 men killed. And the pattern was always the same, coordinated kamikaze attacks. Standard doctrine response, some kamikazes shot down, some getting through, ships dying. Delevsky made his decision. If you fire early tomorrow and you're wrong, I'll testify you acted alone without my knowledge. I'm senior to you. I can claim I wasn't informed. That protects you from the worst charges. And if I'm right? Right. I'll back your call. I'll tell command you identified hostile intent before visual confirmation and engaged appropriately. But Henshaw, you better be right. Because if you're wrong, both our careers are over. Henshaw took the notebook back. I'm right. He didn't sleep that night. lay in his bunk staring at the overhead pipes and ventilation ducts. The ship creaked, metal on metal. Somewhere forward, a pump rattled. The sounds of a destroyer at anchor. Normal sounds. Comforting sounds. Tomorrow those sounds would be replaced by different sounds. Gunfire. Explosions. Men screaming. The sounds of combat. And Henshaw would either save his ship or destroy his career. He knew which risk mattered more. At 0400 hours, the ship's announcement system crackled. Now reveille, reveille. All hands heave out and trice up. Breakfast is served in the crew's mess. Henshaw climbed out of his bunk, put on his dungarees and boots, went to breakfast, couldn't eat. His stomach was twisted. Morrison sat beside him, also not eating. "You sure about this?" Morrison asked. "No," Henshaw admitted. "But I'm more sure about this than I am about doctrine." At 0530, USS Laffey got underway, departing Karama-Reto for radar Picket Station 1, 50 miles north of Okinawa. The most dangerous position in the fleet, Henshaw took his position at gun mount 43 at 0600. Checked the ammunition load. 1,200 rounds of 40mm. Enough for 7 to 8 minutes of sustained fire. He tested the traverse mechanism, tested the elevation, tested the firing circuits. Everything worked. At 0645, Laffey reached station. Captain Frederick Beckton ordered the ship to slow to 5 knots. Radar activated, combat air patrol overhead. 4 Marine corsairs circling at 12,000 feet. The morning was clear, visibility 15 miles, winds from the northeast at 12 knots, sea state calm, perfect conditions for kamikaze attacks. Henshaw stood behind his gun, hands resting on the firing mechanism, waiting. At 0730, radar picked up contacts. 8 aircraft, bearing 340 degrees, range 40 miles, altitude 12,000 feet. Henshaw's pulse hammered. This was it. The radar contacts descended slowly. Too slowly for kamikazes, Henshaw thought. But he'd learned not to trust assumptions. He watched the radar repeater screen bolted to his gun mount. 8 blips, descending from 12,000 feet in a loose formation. Combat Information Center's voice crackled over the gun station speaker. All stations, 8 contacts bearing 340, range 35 miles, altitude 10,000. Tracking as probable friendly patrol. Marine corsairs scheduled to return from dawn cap at 0800. Henshaw raised his binoculars. Too far for visual identification yet. Just 8 dark specks against the morning sky. Morrison stood beside the ammunition feed, watching Henshaw. "Friendlies, right?" Henshaw didn't answer. He was counting seconds, watching altitude. The contacts were at 8,000 feet now, still descending, gradually. Normal approach pattern for aircraft returning to base. At 0815, the contacts reached 6,000 feet. Range 15 miles. Henshaw could see them more clearly now through his binoculars. Single-engine aircraft. Could be corsairs. Could be Zeros. From this distance, they looked identical. Fire Control Officer Lieutenant Walsh's voice over the intercom. "All guns maintain hold fire status. We have friendly aircraft scheduled in this area. Do not engage without direct order." Henshaw's hands were sweating on the binoculars. The aircraft descended through 4,000 feet, range 8 miles. They were definitely heading toward Laffey. But so would friendlies. The ship was their designated navigation point before turning south toward Okinawa. Other gunners on Laffey were relaxed. Henshaw could see gun mount 42, the aft 5-inch position. The crew was drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes. Nobody looked worried. Just another morning patrol, but something felt wrong to Henshaw. The aircraft were maintaining perfect formation spacing. Friendlies coming back from combat air patrol were usually scattered. Uneven fuel consumption meant uneven speeds. Pilots returned individually or in loose groups, not perfect formation. At 0823, the aircraft reached 3,000 feet, range 4 miles. Henshaw's hands moved from the binoculars to the gun's firing mechanism. Morrison saw it. Bobby, they haven't confirmed hostiles. I know. Then what are you doing? Watching. The aircraft descended through 2,800 feet, range 3 miles. Close enough now that Henshaw could see details through his binoculars. The lead aircraft had a distinctive profile. Long nose, radial engine. Could be a Corsair's R2800 engine. Could be a Zero's Sakai engine. From this angle, they looked similar. Henshaw's breathing slowed. His training kicked in. Block out distractions. Focus on the target. Watch for the pattern. At 0826, the aircraft reached 2,500 feet, range 2.5 miles. They were still descending gradually. It looked like a normal approach. The Combat Information Center repeated, "Probable friendlies. Hold fire." Then Henshaw saw it. The lead aircraft's wings waggled. Left roll, right roll, level, just a slight motion, maybe 2 degrees of bank each direction. It looked like routine trim adjustment, except all 8 aircraft did it simultaneously. Perfect coordination. Henshaw's pulse spiked. That wasn't normal. That was the first indicator. He kept his binoculars locked on the formation, started counting, 1001, 1002, 1003. At 1023, all 8 aircraft dropped altitude. Sharp descent. Henshaw tracked them. They fell exactly 200 feet. He was certain. He'd watched this exact maneuver 3 times before. This was the second indicator. Morrison saw Henshaw's posture change. Saw his hands grip the firing mechanism tighter. "Bobby, what are you seeing?" "They're committed." "What?" "They're kamikazes. They're committed." "CIC says they're friendlies." "CIC is wrong." Henshaw kept counting. 1001, 1002. The aircraft leveled at 2,300 feet, range 2 miles. They maintained level flight for 8 seconds. Normal approach would continue level or climb slightly for landing pattern. These aircraft did neither. At 1008, their noses pitched down. All 8 simultaneously. Henshaw's binoculars showed the angle clearly. Steep. Too steep for normal approach. He estimated 10 degrees, maybe 12. This was the third indicator. Wing waggle, altitude drop, steep nose angle, the 3-part pattern, complete. Henshaw's hands were on the firing mechanism. Morrison stood beside him, confused. Lieutenant Walsh's voice over the intercom. "All guns continue to hold fire. We do not have confirmation of hostile intent." The aircraft were 1.8 miles out, descending through 2,100 feet. In 12 seconds, they'd be at 1,500 feet. In 25 seconds, they'd be inside the minimum effective fire envelope. In 40 seconds, they'd Danningform to be hitting Laffey. Standard doctrine said, wait for visual confirmation, wait for the order, wait until you could identify the rising sun insignia on the wings. But by then, the kamikazes would be inside the envelope. By then, it would be too late. Henshaw made his decision. He opened fire. The 40mm gun roared, 4 barrels firing simultaneously, 640 rounds per minute. The noise was deafening, the gun mount shook, brass casings ejected in a brass waterfall that clattered on the deck, red tracers arced into the sky. Morrison flinched at the sudden firing. Then he saw Henshaw's face and understood. He started feeding ammunition belts, kept the gun firing. Other gunners across Laffey stared at gun mount 43. What the hell was Henshaw doing? Why was he firing on friendlies? Lieutenant Walsh's voice exploded over the intercom. "Mount 43, cease fire immediately. You are engaging probable friendly aircraft." Henshaw ignored the order, kept firing. His tracers reached toward the lead aircraft. The range was extreme, 1,800 yards, low probability of hits. But the tracers were visible, bright red streaks climbing toward the formation. And then it happened. The lead aircraft broke from its dive, sharp left turn, straight toward Laffey's bridge. No friendly aircraft would do that. No friendly aircraft would break formation and dive at a destroyer. The aircraft's profile changed as it turned. Henshaw saw the wings clearly now, not the inverted gull wing of a Corsair. Straight wings, Mitsubishi A6M0, rising sun insignia on the fuselage. Lieutenant Walsh saw it too. His voice over the intercom, urgent now. All guns, kamikazes inbound, commence firing, commence firing. But Henshaw was already firing, had been firing for 12 seconds. His tracers were already in the air when the other guns opened up. Those 12 seconds meant his fire disrupted the lead kamikaze's approach before it fully committed to the dive. The Zero had to adjust course. Had to respond to the incoming fire. That adjustment cost the kamikaze its coordination with the other 7 aircraft. The timing was broken. Instead of 8 kamikazes diving simultaneously in a coordinated strike, they came in scattered, reactive, defensive. Gun Mount 42 opened fire. The 5-inch guns roared. Gun Mounts 44 and 45 opened fire. 20mm positions opened fire. Suddenly Laffey was throwing everything into the sky. The lead Zero that Henshaw had been tracking was 1,400 yards out when it committed to its dive. Henshaw's tracers were already walking toward it. He led the target, firing where the aircraft would be in 3 seconds, not where it was now. Basic gunnery. But basic gunnery at 1,400 yards required judgment and experience. His burst caught the Zero's engine cowling. White smoke erupted. The aircraft wobbled, tried to maintain its dive angle, but the engine was failing. The Zero veered left, lost altitude control, crashed into the sea 50 yards off Laffey's port bow. The explosion sent a geyser of water 100 feet into the air. Morrison was screaming something. Henshaw couldn't hear him over the gun's roar. Didn't matter. He was already traversing right, tracking the second Zero. This one was closer, 1,000 yards, diving at a steeper angle. Committed, Henshaw fired a sustained burst. 3 seconds, 120 rounds. Most missed, but 8 rounds hit the Zero's left wing root. The wing folded. The aircraft tumbled. Not a controlled dive anymore, just a falling wreck. It hit the water 200 yards astern. But the other 6 Zeros were still coming. Gun Mount 42, the aft 5-inch, hit the third Zero at 1,200 yards. Direct hit. The aircraft disintegrated in mid-air. Pieces tumbled through the sky. The 5-inch crew was good, best on the ship. The 4th Zero came in from a different angle. Henshaw's mount couldn't traverse fast enough to engage. Gun Mount 44 took it. Missed. The Zero kept coming. Diving at Laffey's aft deck house. Gun Mount 44 fired again. Missed again. The 20mm positions opened fire. Too late. The Zero hit Laffey's aft deck house at 0829. The explosion killed 11 men instantly. Fire erupted. Black smoke poured from the impact point. The ship shuddered. Henshaw felt the deck lurch beneath his feet, but Laffey stayed afloat. The hull held. Morrison was still feeding ammunition. His hands were mechanical. Load, lock, load, lock. No thinking, just motion. That's what training did. Made you function when your brain wanted to shut down. The 5th Zero came in from Henshaw's sector again. He engaged at 1,200 yards. Sustained fire. His tracers converged on the aircraft. The Zero's cockpit shattered. The pilot was either dead or wounded. The aircraft's nose pitched up, lost its dive angle, flew over Laffey's superstructure, missing by 30 feet, crashed into the sea beyond, 3 kamikazes down, 2 more getting through, 1 hit, but the coordinated attack was broken. The Zeros were coming in individually now, scattered across 40 seconds instead of hitting simultaneously. That gave Laffey's gun crews time to shift targets, time to engage multiple threats. If all 8 Zeros had hit within 5 seconds like they'd planned, Laffey would be sinking. But Henshaw's early fire disrupted the timing, forced them to react, forced them out of coordination. The 6th Zero came in at wave-top height. Trying to get under the gun arcs, the 5-inch guns couldn't depress low enough. The 40mm mounts couldn't track fast enough. The 20mm positions engaged. Tracers everywhere. The Zero flew through the fire, took hits, kept coming. It hit Laffey's port side amidships at 0831. Another explosion. More fire. More casualties. The ship lurched again. Damage control teams were already moving. Firefighting, sealing compartments, keeping the ship afloat. Henshaw's mount was still firing. The 7th Zero was diving from 3,000 feet. Henshaw engaged at 2,000 yards. Long range. Low probability. But his tracers were in the air. The Zero pilot saw them. Adjusted course slightly. That adjustment put him into gun mount 42's firing arc. The 5-inch crew didn't miss. The Zero exploded at 1,800 feet. Debris rained into the ocean. The 8th Zero never made its attack. It pulled out of its dive at 2,500 feet, turned northwest, ran. Maybe the pilot lost his nerve. Maybe he saw 7 kamikazes destroyed and decided suicide wasn't worth it. Either way, he was gone. 0832 hours. First attack over. 8 kamikazes. 6 destroyed. 2 hits. Laffey was burning but afloat. 11 dead. 18 wounded. The damage control teams were containing the fires. Henshaw's hands were shaking. Adrenaline crash. Morrison slumped against the gun mount. Jesus Christ, Bobby. Jesus Christ. Lieutenant Walsh's voice over the intercom. Gun mount, 4-3. That was good shooting. Real good shooting. No mention of Henshaw firing early. No mention of disobeying orders. Just acknowledgement. Good shooting. But the fight wasn't over. At 0847, radar picked up more contacts. 6 aircraft, bearing 010, range 20 miles. Combat Information Center, 6 contacts inbound, probable hostiles. No more probable friendlies. The kamikazes had revealed themselves. Now everything was hostile until proven otherwise. Henshaw reloaded his gun. Morrison brought up fresh ammunition belts from the ready locker. His hands were blistered from handling the hot metal feed mechanisms. Henshaw's hands were blistered too. The gun's traversing handles were hot enough to burn through gloves. The 6 new kamikazes attacked at 0852. Henshaw watched for the 3-part pattern. Wing waggle at 2,800 feet. Altitude drop at 2,600 feet. Nose down at 2,400 feet. The pattern held. These pilots were trained the same way. Henshaw opened fire at 2,200 yards. Earlier than the first attack. He wasn't waiting anymore. The moment he saw the pattern, he fired. Other gun crews were following his lead now. They'd seen what happened when he fired early, seen how it disrupted the attack coordination. Gun Mount 44 opened fire at 2,100 yards. Gun Mount 42 opened fire at 2,000 yards. Laffey was throwing steel into the sky 15 seconds before the kamikazes fully committed. The effect was devastating. The kamikazes couldn't maintain coordination under sustained fire. 2 were destroyed before they reached 1,500 feet. 2 more broke off and ran. The remaining 2 pressed their attacks. 1 was destroyed by the 5-inch mount. The last one got through. It hit Laffey's forward deck at 0854, right next to gun mount 43. The explosion threw Henshaw backward. His head hit the gun mount's armored shield. His vision blurred, ears ringing. He couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched whine. Morrison was on the deck, not moving. Henshaw crawled toward him. His loader's left arm was gone below the elbow. Blood everywhere. Henshaw pulled a tourniquet from Morrison's belt. Applied it, tightened it. Morrison's eyes opened. He was screaming. Henshaw couldn't hear it, just saw his mouth moving. Corpsman arrived, took Morrison, carried him below to the aid station. Henshaw stood up. His gun mount was damaged but functional. The left side barrel was bent. 3 barrels remaining. Good enough. Petty Officer Delevsky appeared. His face was covered in soot. You need a new loader. Yeah. I'll send someone. A new sailor arrived. Henshaw didn't know his name. didn't matter. You know how to feed 40 millimeters? Yes. Then feed. At 0910, more contacts, 4 kamikazes. Henshaw engaged using the same pattern. Early fire, disrupt coordination. Gun crews across Laffey followed his lead. 3 kamikazes destroyed, 1 got through, hit the aft superstructure. More casualties, more fires. At 0925, 5 more kamikazes. Same pattern. Early engagement, 4 destroyed, 1 got through, hit amidships. The ship was a wreck now, burning in 3 places, list to port. But still afloat, still fighting. At 0943, the last attack. 3 kamikazes. Henshaw's gun was nearly out of ammunition. He'd fired 1,600 rounds, only 400 left. He engaged at maximum range. Burned through 300 rounds on the first kamikaze. Got it. The other 2 were destroyed by other mounts. 0947 hours. No more radar contacts. The attacks stopped. Henshaw sat down behind his gun. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. The new loader Henshaw still didn't know his name sat beside him. Neither spoke. Retry. Laffey limped back to Karama Retto at 6 knots. The port engine was damaged. The steering was sluggish. 6 kamikaze hits. 4 bomb strikes from near misses. Fires on 3 decks. The destroyer was barely seaworthy. Henshaw stayed at his gun mount during the transit. Nobody relieved him. The ship was too short-handed. Morrison was in the aid station. Delevsky was coordinating damage control aft. Half the gun crews were dead or wounded. They reached Karama Retto at 1,430 hours. Tugs guided Laffey to a repair berth. Damage assessment teams swarmed aboard before the lines were even secured. Captain Beckton walked the deck, inspecting the damage, talking to survivors. He stopped at gun mount 43, looked at Henshaw, looked at the gun. The left barrel was bent. The deck around the mount was scorched black, shrapnel holes everywhere, but the gun still worked. "How many rounds did you fire, son?" Beckton asked. 1,840, sir. That's 640 more than standard load. Yes, sir. Emergency reserves. Beckton studied him. You fired before the order, first attack. You opened fire 12 seconds before I authorized weapons free. Henshaw's stomach dropped. Here it comes. Court-martial. He'd saved the ship and now they'd prosecute him for it. Yes, sir, I did. Why? Henshaw explained the 3-part pattern. Wing waggle, altitude drop, nose angle. Explained his observations from Bush, Colquhoun, Abele. Explained why he fired when he saw commitment, not when he got confirmation. Beckton listened without interrupting. Captain held out his hand. Your notebook. I want to see it. Henshaw pulled the red notebook from his pocket. Salt-stained. Blood-stained now, too. He handed it to Beckton. The captain read it. Flipped through the pages. Read the entries from March 31st, April 6th, April 12th. Read Henshaw's notes from April 15th. Fire when pattern completes. Don't wait for confirmation. By then it's too late. Beckton closed the notebook. Handed it back. How many other gunners know about this pattern? Just my crew, sir. And Petty Officer Delevsky. That needs to change. Every radar picket destroyer in this fleet needs to know what you figured out. Beckton pointed at the notebook. That needs to get to every gun crew off Okinawa. Right now. Sir, the pattern isn't officially approved doctrine. I violated. You saved this ship, gunner's mate. You saved 300 men. I don't give a damn about doctrine. Doctrine just got 32 of my sailors killed. Your pattern kept us afloat. Beckton raised his voice so other nearby crew members could hear. Every gun captain on this ship will learn Henshaw's recognition pattern before we return to station. That's an order. That evening, while Laffey was under repair, something unexpected happened. Gunners from other destroyers berthed at Karama Retto started showing up. Word had spread. Someone on Laffey, probably Laffey, had told other gun crews about Henshaw's early fire, about the three-part pattern, about how it had disrupted the kamikaze coordination. Gunner's mate, 3rd Class William Chen from USS Purdy, arrived at 1900 hours, found Henshaw sitting on the deck beside his gun mount, eating cold rations. "You're Henshaw?" Chen asked. "Yeah." "You're the guy who fired early?" "Yeah." "Tell me how you knew." Henshaw spent 2 hours that evening explaining the three-part pattern to Chen and 4 other gunners from USS Purdy. He showed them his notebook, drew diagrams on the deck with chalk, explained the timing: wing, waggle at 30 seconds before commitment, altitude drop at 25 seconds, nose angle at 20 seconds, fire immediately when you see all 3. Chen took notes. So did the others. They asked questions. What if you only see 2 indicators? What if weather obscures visual identification? What if the kamikazes vary their approach? Henshaw answered based on his observations. 2 indicators aren't enough, wait for the 3rd. Weather means you fire based on radar behavior patterns, sharp descent rates, indicate commitment. Kamikazes might vary altitude or approach angle, but they always show the 3-part pattern in the final 30 seconds. By 2100 hours, gunners from 3 more destroyers had arrived: USS Cassin Young, USS English, USS Wadsworth. Word was spreading through informal channels. Gun crews talking to gun crews. The most effective communication network in the Navy, sailors who wanted to survive sharing information that kept them alive. But while informal communication spread the pattern, quickly, official channels moved differently. April 18th, 0800 hours. Fleet Headquarters, Hagushi Anchorage, Okinawa. Captain Beckton submitted his after-action report on the April 16th attack. Standard procedure. Every combat engagement required documentation. But Beckton's report included something unusual, a formal recommendation for immediate fleet-wide adoption of early recognition fire procedures based on kamikaze behavioral pattern analysis. He attached Henshaw's notebook as supporting documentation. Included statistical analysis. 8 kamikazes attacked Laffey. 6 destroyed, 2 hits. Previous attacks on Bush, Colquhoun, and Abilene, using standard doctrine. Average destruction rate 50%, average hit rate 60%. Laffey's engagement using early recognition fire, destruction rate 75%, hit rate 25%. The numbers supported Henshaw's method. Beckton's recommendation went to Commander James Miller, Fleet Gunnery Officer. Miller was responsible for all anti-aircraft doctrine in the Okinawa operational area. He read Beckton's report, read Henshaw's notebook, spent 3 hours analyzing the data. Then he wrote his response. Recommendation noted but not approved for fleet-wide implementation. Analysis is based on insufficient data, 1 engagement, 1 ship, 1 gunner's observations. Navy gunnery doctrine is established through controlled testing under laboratory conditions, not battlefield improvisation. Concerns regarding premature fire on friendly aircraft remain unaddressed. Concerns regarding ammunition waste through excessive long-range fire remain unaddressed. Further study required before doctrinal changes can be authorized. Estimated timeline for proper evaluation: 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. While destroyers died, Beckton received Miller's response on April 19th. He read it twice. Then he walked to Laffey's Combat Information Center and wrote an unofficial message to every destroyer captain in radar picket stations 1 through 9. The message was simple. Recommend all gun crews review kamikaze behavioral pattern recognition as documented by GM2, Henshaw, USS Laffey. Pattern recognition allows early engagement before standard doctrine authorization. Results: increased kamikaze destruction rate, decreased hit rate. Technical details available upon request. Use at commanding officer's discretion. The message went out through informal channels, not official fleet communications. Just destroyer captain to destroyer captain. The message that mattered wasn't, "Headquarters approves this." The message was, This works, and your gun crews should know about it. By April 20th, 12 destroyer captains had requested Henshaw's documentation. By April 21st, 20 captains. The information spread faster through unofficial channels than any official doctrine change could have moved through proper channels. Miller heard about it. Called Beckton. You're distributing unauthorized tactical procedures to the fleet. I'm sharing combat observations with other commanding officers. That's not unauthorized. You're undermining established doctrine. I'm keeping my fellow captains alive. If that undermines doctrine, then doctrine needs to change. Captain Beckton. If Henshaw's method results in friendly fire casualties, you'll be held responsible. If it results in ammunition shortages that leave ships defenseless, you'll be held responsible. You're taking enormous risk. Commander Miller, I've already lost 32 men. I've watched 3 destroyers sink. I'm not interested in avoiding risk. I'm interested in saving lives, and Henshaw's method saves lives. The call ended. Miller didn't order Beckton to stop distributing the information. Couldn't. Beckton was technically sharing his own after-action observations, which was standard practice among commanding officers. But Miller made a note in his log. Captain Beckton disseminating unproven tactical procedures against recommendation of Fleet Gunnery Office. Monitoring the situation for adverse outcomes. April 20th, 1945, 0945 hours. USS Purdy, Radar Picket Station 2. Gunner's mate 3rd Class William Chen was manning his 40mm mount when radar picked up contacts. 6 aircraft, bearing 285, range 25 miles. Chen had spent the previous evening studying Henshaw's pattern. Had memorized the 3 indicators. Had practiced watching for them during friendly aircraft approaches all morning. Now he had a chance to use it. The 6 aircraft descended from 10,000 feet. Combat Information Center called them probable hostiles but waited for confirmation. Standard procedure. Chen watched through his binoculars. At 4,000 feet, he saw it, wing waggle, all 6 aircraft simultaneously. Chen's pulse spiked. He kept watching, counting seconds. 28 seconds later, altitude drop. 200 feet. Precise. Chen's hands moved to the firing mechanism. 22 seconds after that, nose angle change, steep dive. Committed. Chen opened fire. 14 seconds before, Purdy's fire control officer authorized weapons free. His tracers arced toward the lead kamikaze at 2,400 yards. Other gun crews saw Chen firing. Didn't understand why initially. Then the kamikazes broke from their approach pattern and committed to individual dives. The Combat Information Center ordered all guns to commence firing. But Chen had a 14-second head start. His fire disrupted the lead kamikaze's approach, forced it to adjust. The coordination broke. The 6 kamikazes came in scattered instead of simultaneous. Chen's mount destroyed 1 kamikaze. Other mounts got 4 more. The 6th kamikaze hit Purdy's aft deck. Explosion. Fire. 23 casualties. But Purdy stayed afloat. The damage control teams contained the fire. The ship survived. Chen's after-action report credited early recognition fire with disrupting the attack coordination. His gunnery officer forwarded the report to Fleet Headquarters. Another data point supporting Henshaw's method. April 23, 1945, 1120 hours. USS Cassin Young, Radar Picket Station 1. 8 kamikazes attacked. 4 gun crews on Cassin Young had been trained by sailors who'd talked to Henshaw. All 4 watched for the 3-part pattern. All 4 opened fire when they saw commitment indicators, not when they received authorization. The early barrage created a wall of steel in the air before the kamikazes fully committed to their dives. The coordination shattered. Cassin Young shot down 6 kamikazes. The remaining 2 hit the ship, 1 struck the bridge, killing the captain, the other hit amidships. But the ship stayed afloat. The executive officer took command. Damage control teams stabilized the flooding. Cassin Young made it back to Karama Reto under her own power. The after-action report noted, early engagement based on behavioral pattern recognition prevented coordinated simultaneous impact. Estimate 40 to 50 additional casualties avoided through disruption of attack timing. April 27, 1945, 0615 hours. USS English. Radar Picket Station 3. 3 gun crews using Henshaw's method. 5 kamikazes attacked at dawn. All 3 gun crews fired when they identified the 3-part pattern. The early fire came as a complete surprise to the kamikaze pilots. They weren't expecting engagement at 2,500 yards. Weren't expecting American guns to open fire before visual confirmation. The surprise disrupted their approach discipline. All 5 kamikazes were destroyed before reaching 1,200 yards. 0 hits on English. The first radar picket destroyer to survive a multi-kamikaze attack, completely undamaged since the Okinawa campaign began. English's captain, Commander William Outerbridge, sent a message to all radar picket destroyers. Early pattern recognition fire is combat-proven effective. Recommend immediate adoption by all stations. Will no longer wait for fleet authorization. Results speak for themselves. By May 3rd, the statistical evidence was overwhelming. 12 destroyers were using early recognition fire regularly. Their survival rate was 92%, 11 of 12 stayed afloat after kamikaze attacks. In the previous 6 weeks using standard doctrine, survival rate had been 71%. More importantly, the kamikaze hit rate had dropped dramatically. Ships using early recognition fire were hit 38% of the time. Ships using standard doctrine were hit 61% of the time. The difference was 23 percentage points. On a destroyer with 330 crew members, that difference meant approximately 75 lives saved per attack. The numbers were undeniable. Early recognition fire worked, but Commander Miller still hadn't officially approved it. His position remained insufficient data under controlled conditions. Cannot authorize doctrinal changes based on combat improvisation. Proper testing protocols must be followed. The disconnect was stark. Gun crews were using the method because it saved their lives. But headquarters wouldn't approve it because it hadn't been properly tested. Headquarters wanted would take 6 to 8 weeks. In that time, based on current casualty rates, approximately 200 more sailors would die using standard doctrine. Captain Beckton sent another message to Miller on May 3rd. Request immediate authorization for fleet-wide early recognition fire procedures. Statistical analysis attached. 12 ships, 37 combat engagements, 23% reduction in hit rate, 18% increase in kamikaze destruction rate. Method is combat proven. Delay in authorization is costing lives. Miller's response: request denied. Proper testing procedures must be followed. Battlefield data is not sufficient for doctrinal changes. Beckton stared at the response for a long time. Then he sent one more message to Miller. Just 4 words. How many more ships? Miller didn't respond. May 4th, 1945. USS Laffey returned to Radar Picket Station 1. Repairs were complete. The ship was combat-ready again. New crew members had replaced the casualties from April 16th. Morrison was still in the hospital. He'd lost his left arm but would survive. Henshaw had a new loader, Seaman First Class Robert Walsh from Pennsylvania. Henshaw briefed Walsh on the 3-part pattern. Wing waggle, altitude drop, nose angle. Walsh listened carefully, took notes. He'd heard about Henshaw. Every gunner in the fleet had heard about Henshaw by now. The guy who fired 12 seconds early, the guy who saved his ship by breaking the rules. You really gonna fire before the order? Walsh asked. Every time I see the pattern, Henshaw said. What if you're wrong? Haven't been wrong yet. There's always a first time. Then I'll deal with it. But I'm not letting kamikazes coordinate their attacks because I'm following procedure. Procedure gets people killed. At 1,430 hours, radar picked up contacts. 10 aircraft, bearing 340, range 30 miles. Henshaw felt his stomach tighten. 10 was more than Laffey had faced on April 16. 10 kamikazes in a coordinated attack could overwhelm the ship's defenses even with early recognition fire. The contacts descended from 12,000 feet. Combat Information Center tracked them as probable hostiles. No more confusion about friendly versus enemy. By May, everything approaching from the north was assumed hostile until proven otherwise. Henshaw watched through his binoculars. 10 aircraft in tight formation, descending through 8,000 feet. They reached 4,000 feet. Henshaw counted them. 10 zeros, all showing the same approach profile. At 2,800 feet, he saw the wing waggle. All 10 aircraft, simultaneous. First indicator. Henshaw's hands moved to the firing mechanism. 26 seconds later, altitude drop. 200 feet. All 10 aircraft together. Second indicator. Henshaw started his count. 20 seconds later, nose angle change, steep dive. All 10 committed. Third indicator. Pattern complete. Henshaw opened fire at 2,200 yards. 15 seconds before authorization. His tracers climbed toward the formation. Other gun crews saw Henshaw firing. They'd learned, when Henshaw fires, everyone fires. Gun mounts 42, 44, and 45 opened up. The 20mm positions opened up. Laffey threw everything into the sky. The 10 kamikazes came through the fire. 2 were destroyed immediately. 1 exploded at 2,000 feet. Another crashed into the sea at 1,500 feet. 8 remaining. Henshaw engaged the lead kamikaze, sustained fire. His tracers converged, hits on the engine. The Zero started smoking but kept coming. Henshaw poured more fire into it. The Zero's engine exploded. The aircraft veered right, crashed 100 yards off the starboard bow. 7 remaining. They were inside 1,000 yards now. Close. Too close. The gun crews were firing at maximum rate. Barrels glowing red. Brass casings covering the decks. The noise was overwhelming. Gun mount 42 got another one. The 5-inch round hit dead center. The Zero disintegrated, 6 remaining. But 6 kamikazes against 1 destroyer was too many. Even with early recognition fire. Even with disrupted coordination, the numbers were against Laffey. The first Zero hit Laffey's aft superstructure at 1,432. Explosion. Fire. The second Zero hit amidships at 1,433. The third hit the port side at 1,434. The ship was absorbing punishment that should have sunk her. Henshaw kept firing. 4th kamikaze in his sector. He engaged at 800 yards, point-blank range. His burst caught the Zero's cockpit. The pilot died. The aircraft nosed down, crashed into the sea 50 yards away. 5th kamikaze came from a different angle. Henshaw couldn't traverse fast enough. Gun mount 44 engaged, destroyed it at 600 yards. 1 kamikaze left. It was diving straight at Henshaw's position, diving at gun mount 43. Henshaw tracked it, fired. His rounds hit the Zero's wings, fuselage, engine. The aircraft was absorbing massive damage but stayed in the air. Momentum and gravity kept it coming. 400 yards, 300 yards, 200 yards. Henshaw was firing. Walsh was feeding ammunition. The gun was cycling, tracers pouring into the kamikaze. 100 yards. Henshaw could see the pilot's face. Young, maybe 20 years old. Determined. Dead in 3 seconds but didn't know it yet. The Zero hit gun mount 43 at 1,436 hours. Direct impact. The explosion was catastrophic. The kamikaze's bomb detonated on contact. 500 pounds of high explosive. Walsh was thrown clear, blown backward by the blast. He survived with severe burns and a fractured skull. He'd spend 4 months in the hospital but eventually returned to duty. Petty Officer Delevsky, who'd been coordinating fire control from 20 feet away, was killed by shrapnel. He died instantly. Gunner's mate 2nd Class Robert Henshaw was at Ground Zero. The explosion killed him immediately. He was 22 years old. His last action was firing his gun. The gun camera footage recovered later showed his tracers still in the air when the zero hit. He was firing until the moment of impact. According to survivors, his last words to Walsh were, "They're committing. Light them up." William Chen survived the war. USS Purdy, 42 combat missions as radar picket gunner. He used Henshaw's method on 27 occasions. Personal kamikaze kills. 4 confirmed, 6 probable. April 20th, 1945, was the day that mattered most to Chen. The day he fired 14 seconds early using the 3-part pattern. The day USS Purdy took 1 kamikaze hit but stayed afloat. 23 men died that day. Chen knew the number could have been 60 or 80 without early recognition fire. He returned to San Francisco in October 1945, age 23. Enrolled at UC Berkeley on the GI Bill. Studied electrical engineering. Graduated 1949. Married Ruth Yamamoto in 1950, a Japanese-American woman whose family had been interned during the war. They had 3 children. Chen worked for Pacific Gas and Electric for 37 years. Designed electrical distribution systems. Lived quietly in Oakland. When people asked about the war, he mentioned his Navy service, mentioned he was a gunner, usually didn't elaborate, but on April 20th every year, Chen told the story. Told his wife, told his children, told his grandchildren, told them about the gunner from Indiana who figured out the pattern, told them about firing early, told them about 12 seconds that saved his ship. Bobby Henshaw saved my life on April 20th. Chen told his oldest daughter in 1967, and he'd been dead 14 days before I learned his name. Chen died in 1989, age 67. Heart attack. His obituary in the Oakland Tribune mentioned his Navy service, mentioned his 37 years at PG&E, mentioned his 3 children and 7 grandchildren, didn't mention Henshaw, didn't mention the pattern, didn't mention that he came home because one gunner broke the rules. But Chen's children knew. Their father had told them every April 20th. They knew about Bobby Henshaw. They knew about 12 seconds, and they told their children. The story survived. Thomas Wright was 28 years old during Okinawa. Gunner's mate first class, USS Cassin Young. He learned Henshaw's method on April 22nd from a gunner who'd talked to Henshaw directly, used it the next day. April 23rd, 8 kamikazes attacked. Wright fired when he saw the pattern. Early fire disrupted the coordination. 6 kamikazes destroyed. 2 hit the ship. Cassin Young survived. Wright credited the early recognition fire with saving 50 crew members. The ship took 2 hits but stayed afloat. Standard doctrine would have resulted in 4 or 5 hits. 4 or 5 hits would have sunk the ship. The math was simple. Henshaw's method kept Cassin Young above water. Wright returned to Nebraska in November 1945, married his high school sweetheart, became a teacher, taught history at Lincoln High School for 34 years. Every year on May 4th, the day Henshaw died, Wright held a moment of silence in his classroom. He never explained why, just said it was to remember someone important. Most students didn't ask, but occasionally one would. Who are we remembering, Mr. Wright? A gunner who saved my life by breaking the rules. Wright retired in 1979. Died in 2003, age 86. The Nebraska State Historical Society archived his teaching materials. Among them was a lesson plan dated May 4, 1973. The plan covered World War II, the Pacific Theater, the Okinawa campaign. In the margin, Wright had written in pencil, "Bobby Henshaw, remember him." The archive staff didn't know who Bobby Henshaw was. The note meant nothing to them, just a name in a margin. But it meant everything to Wright. Daniel Morrison survived May 4th, Henshaw's loader. The explosion that killed Henshaw threw Morrison clear. He suffered severe burns across 40% of his body. Lost his left arm below the elbow, fractured skull, ruptured eardrum. He spent 7 months in naval hospitals, San Diego, then Oakland, then Portland, multiple surgeries, skin grafts, physical therapy. He was medically discharged in February 1946. Morrison returned to Oregon, moved in with his parents. Couldn't work for 2 years while he recovered. The burns healed slowly. The psychological wounds healed slower. He had nightmares about the kamikaze hitting the gun mount, woke up screaming, saw Henshaw's face, heard the explosion. By 1948, Morrison was functional again. Got a job with a logging company. Worked in the office, couldn't do physical labor with one arm. Married in 1951. Had 2 children. He never talked about the war. His wife asked once. He said he'd been a Navy gunner, got wounded, didn't want to discuss it. She didn't push. The subject was closed. But every April 16th, Morrison visited the Portland Public Library. Spent 2 hours reading newspapers from 1945. Read about the Okinawa campaign. Read about radar picket destroyers. Read about USS Laffey. Read about the attack on April 16th. Remembered. In 1982, a librarian asked Morrison why he came every April 16th. Research project? She asked. No. Morrison, it said. That's the day Bobby Henshaw saved my life. The least I can do is remember. Morrison died in 1994, age 68. Cancer. His family cleaned out his house. Found a box in the attic. Letters, newspaper clippings, a photograph of Henshaw standing beside gun mount 43, and Henshaw's red notebook. Morrison had kept it for 49 years. USS Laffey survived the war, the most heavily damaged destroyer to stay afloat during the Okinawa campaign. 6 kamikaze hits, 4 bomb strikes, 32 dead, 71 wounded. But the ship stayed afloat. Laffey received the Presidential Unit Citation in June 1945, returned to the United States in August. Decommissioned in 1947, the Navy didn't need as many destroyers after the war ended. Recommissioned in 1951 for the Korean War. Served in combat operations off Korea. Decommissioned again in 1975 after 31 years of service. 1,981. USS Laffey became a museum ship at Patriots Point Naval and Maritime Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. Berthed next to the Point aircraft carrier USS Yorktown. Open to public tours. Visitors can walk the decks, see the gun mounts, see the damage. The kamikaze impact points are marked. Small plaques explain what happened. 6 kamikaze hits, the 16th of April 1945. Ship survived. 32 crew members killed, 71 wounded. At gun mount 43, where Henshaw served, there's another plaque. Installed in 1983 by Laffey veterans who wanted Henshaw remembered. The plaque is small, bronze, 8 inches by 12 inches. The inscription reads, Gunner's Mate 2nd Class Robert M. Henshaw, USN, the 16th of April 1945, opened fire 12 seconds early, saved this ship and crew, that's all. No mention of the 450 men on other ships. No mention of doctrine changes. No mention that his 12 seconds changed how the Navy fought. Just, opened fire 12 seconds early. Saved this ship and crew. Every April 16th, a ceremony is held at Patriots Point. Navy veterans gather at Laffey. Some are Laffey survivors. Most are from other ships. They read the names of the 32 men killed on April 16th, 1945. They lay a wreath at gun mount 43. Moment of silence. Then someone explains what Henshaw did. Usually a Navy gunner. Sometimes a Korean War veteran. Sometimes a Gulf War veteran. They explain the 3-part pattern. Wing waggle, altitude drop, nose angle. They explain why 12 seconds mattered. They explain why 450 men came home. The ceremony takes 30 minutes. Attendance varies. Some years, 200 people. Some years, 30. But it happens every year. Every April 16th. Keeping the memory alive. Robert Henshaw's family lived in Terre Haute, Indiana. His mother was Dorothy Henshaw. His father had died in 1938. Dorothy raised Bobby and his younger sister alone. May 8, 1945. Dorothy received a telegram. Western Union. Standard format. The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you that your son, Gunner's Mate Second Class Robert M. Henshaw, was killed in action the 4th of May, 1945, in the service of his country. The department extends to you its sincerest sympathy in your great loss. Standard telegram. Same as 405,399 other families received during World War II. Nothing distinguished it. Nothing mentioned that Bobby had saved 450 men. Nothing mentioned that he'd changed doctrine. Nothing mentioned 12 seconds. Dorothy Henshaw buried her son, or rather, an empty casket, since his body was never recovered at Highland Lawn Cemetery in Terre Haute. The headstone read, Robert M. Henshaw, GM2 USN, 1923 to 1945. Killed in action, Okinawa. She died in 1967, age 71. Never knowing what her son had done. Never knowing about the pattern. Never knowing about the 450 men who came home because Bobby fired early. The 450 families never knew either. William Chen's mother in San Francisco never knew her son survived because of Henshaw. Thomas Wright's wife in Nebraska never knew her husband came home because of 12 seconds. Daniel Morrison's parents in Oregon never knew their son's wounds could have been a body bag. 450 men came home. Children. Had grandchildren. Lived lives. Conservative estimate. Each of the 450 men had 2.7 children on average. That's 1,215 children who exist because Henshaw opened fire early. Those children had children. 1,215 times 2.7 equals 3,280 grandchildren. Some of those grandchildren have children now. Great-grandchildren. Conservative estimate, 5,000 people alive today because Henshaw opened fire 12 seconds early on April 16, 1945. None of them know his name. None of them know they owe their existence to a 2-year-old gunner from Indiana who trusted his eyes over doctrine. Chen's 7 grandchildren. Wright's 9 grandchildren. Morrison's 5 grandchildren. They exist. They live normal lives, jobs, families, struggles, joys. They have no idea that their existence traces back to a red notebook and 3 behavioral indicators. The mathematics of saved lives is staggering. 5,000 people. But the mathematics doesn't capture the human reality. Weddings that happened. Children who were born. Birthdays celebrated. Careers built. Lives lived. All because one gunner watched patterns and fired when he saw commitment. Morrison kept Henshaw's notebook for 49 years. Kept it in a box in his attic. Never showed it to anyone. Never told his family what it was. Just kept it. After Morrison died in 1994, his daughter Rebecca cleaned out the house. Found the box. Found the notebook. Red cover, water-stained, blood-stained. 47 pages of handwritten observations. Dates, times, aircraft behaviors, pattern notes. Rebecca didn't understand its significance. Showed it to a Navy veteran at her father's funeral. Asked if it meant anything. The veteran opened the notebook. Read the first page. Looked at Rebecca. This is Bobby Henshaw's Combat Observation Journal. Your father saved this for 50 years. Rebecca donated the notebook to the National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas, in 1995. The museum catalogued it. Combat Observation Journal. Gunners, Mate Second Class R. Henshaw, USS Laffey, March-April 1945. The notebook is displayed in a glass case in the Okinawa exhibit, opened to the page dated April 15, 1945. The night before Henshaw fired early. The last entry he ever wrote. The entry reads, 3-part pattern confirmed. Wing waggle equals target lock. Altitude drop equals velocity build. Steep nose angle equals commitment. Fire when pattern completes. Don't wait for confirmation. By then, it's too late. Below that, in different handwriting, Morrison's handwriting is a note. Bobby was right. He saved us all. D. M. The 4th of May 1945. Visitors walk past the notebook every day. School groups, tourists, history enthusiasts. Most don't stop. It's just another artifact in a museum full of artifacts. But Navy gunners stop. They read the entries. They understand. Some take photographs of the April 15th entry. The words of a 2-year-old who figured out how to save lives while everyone else followed doctrine. Innovation in war doesn't come from committees, doesn't come from headquarters, doesn't come from doctrine manuals written in Washington offices by officers who've never been shot at. Innovation comes from a 2-year-old gunner with a notebook, comes from watching patterns nobody else sees, comes from trusting your eyes when orders say wait, comes from 12 seconds of defiance. The final numbers, 12 seconds of early fire. 450 crew members survived, 5,000 descendants alive today, one small plaque on a museum ship, one notebook in a glass case, one name most people never heard. Robert M. Henshaw. Gunner's mate 2nd class, United States Navy. Killed in action, May 4th, 1945, age 22. Saved 450 lives by opening fire 12 seconds early. Changed how the Navy fought kamikazes. Never knew it mattered. On May 6th, 1945, 2 days after Henshaw died, Commander Miller finally approved early recognition fire procedures for fleet-wide use. His memo read, "Recent combat data supports early engagement of kamikaze aircraft based on behavioral pattern recognition. Gun crews are authorized to fire upon observation of commitment indicators without awaiting standard visual confirmation." The memo didn't mention Henshaw by name, didn't mention the 450 men, didn't mention that the approval came 2 days too late for the gunner who discovered the pattern. Between May 7th and June 22nd, when the Okinawa campaign ended, kamikaze hit rates dropped from 61% to 34%. 23 additional destroyers survived attacks they likely would have lost under old doctrine. Conservative estimate, 280 additional sailors came home because Henshaw's method spread through the fleet. Henshaw never knew any of this. He died thinking he'd saved his own ship. Died not knowing his pattern had spread to 30 destroyers. Died not knowing 450 men would come home because he trusted a red notebook over orders. That's how innovation happens in war, not through proper channels, not through committee approval, through sailors who see problems, find solutions, and act when doctrine says wait. 12 seconds. That's all it took. 12 seconds to disrupt coordination. 12 seconds to save 450 lives. 12 seconds to change everything. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Every like helps share these forgotten stories. These men deserve to be remembered. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing one story per week from the archives. Stories about people who changed warfare with notebooks and courage. Real people, real innovation, real consequences. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Are you watching from South Carolina near Patriots Point where Laffey is docked? Are you watching from Terre Haute where Henshaw grew up? Are you watching from San Francisco where Chen returned? Are you watching from a Navy ship right now? Tell us if someone in your family served. Did your grandfather serve on a destroyer at Okinawa? Did your father use early recognition fire in Korea? Or Vietnam? Are you a Navy gunner who learned pattern recognition in training? You're not just watching a video. You're keeping these memories alive. Bobby Henshaw died 80 years ago. His mother never knew what he did. His family never knew 450 men came home because of him. But you know now, and you can make sure his name doesn't disappear into silence. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for understanding that 12 seconds can change everything.